Local elections are taking place in the United Kingdom today. It's the biggest test for the country's Prime Minister since coming to power. In recent weeks, calls have been mounting for Keir Starmer to go. His popularity waning over Labour's failure to deliver economic growth, ease the cost of living crisis, and his decision to appoint Peter Mandelson as Britain's ambassador to the United States. His Labour Party is expected to face a drubbing at the ballot box. This as anti-immigrant reform of Nigel Farage and the left-wing Greens are expected to make gains from the widespread disillusionment. We can now bring in Tim Bale, Professor of Politics at Queen Mary University, London. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on the programme today. What happens if the polls are right and Labour does in fact face this bloodbath as everyone's predicting? Will calls for Keir Starmer to grow louder?
Well, they'll certainly grow louder. I think the question is whether they will actually be effective. Many Labour MPs clearly can't see Keir Starmer leading them into the next election, but that's in 2 or 3 years' time. And at the moment, I don't think they're absolutely sure who would be best placed to take over from him in the sense of giving the boost the party needs at the opinion polls. The most popular candidate with the public, and probably actually among Labour MPs now, is a guy called Andy Burnham, who is the mayor of Manchester, but unfortunately he is not in Parliament, and you need to be in Parliament to challenge the existing leader and to become leader yourself. So there may be more of a stay of execution, if you like, on Keir Starmer than people currently think.
Why, in your opinion, has Labour struggled to fix the cost of living crisis? I know right now we're with the war in Iran, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, there's energy cuts, what have you, but they've had 2 years now.
Yes, I mean, I think it actually is true to say that inflation was heading in the right direction in the UK. Primarily, that has to do not so much with the government, but with the Bank of England, which controls interest rates and monetary policy. However, it is often the government that gets the blame if the cost of living is rising. So I think it really is a case this time around, actually, of the government not necessarily being at fault. Actually, Iran has just put a spanner in the works, if you like, and prevented the government from doing very much. There have been obviously calls for the government to do something about energy prices, and we'll have to see if it can resist those calls, because those kinds of plans are extremely expensive. And the other thing the government has to worry about, obviously, is the deficit and indeed the debt.
So who stands to benefit from Labour's downfall?
Good question. I think mainly you would have to say it will be Reform. In terms of winning seats from Labour, it will be Reform UK, the populist radical right party. And on the other hand, as you mentioned, it will be the Green Party, who are likely to pick up seats in more inner city, multicultural areas. One thing that is interesting is that the official opposition party, the Conservatives, who were in government in the UK between 2010 and 2024, look likely themselves to lose lots of seats, and they won't be the beneficiary of Labour's problems. In Scotland and Wales, it will be the Scottish Nationalist Party and the Welsh Nationalist Plaid Cymru who are likely to benefit from Labour's problems.
Now, if Reform UK does well as is predicted, does that position Nigel Farage in a better place for the next general election to potentially become the country's prime minister?
I think it probably does. We would have to say that in recent months, Reform has slightly gone off the boil in terms of the opinion polls anyway. It was registering regularly over 30%.
Why is that?
It's now around 25%. Well, I think there is some concern among voters that Nigel Farage and his team lack the experience needed for government. There was some concern, I think, about his initial support for Donald Trump as well. There have been some stories recently about corruption, and there are other stories about Reform candidates that make the party look quite extreme in some voters' eyes.
And what about the Greens?
Well, the Greens themselves have had problems in the last few days, actually caused by some comments that their leader, Zach Polanski, made over a stabbing incident in Golders Green, a heavily Jewish area in the UK, where he seemed more concerned about what he saw as police brutality than he did about the attack on the nation's Jewish population. And his opinion poll ratings do seem to have taken a bit of a dive.
But isn't he Jewish
Whether
himself?
that will actually affect... He is Jewish himself, yes. And one argument among many is that, in fact, he sometimes uses that as some kind of defence for some of the less than appealing opinions that some of his candidates have. But certainly it has got him into trouble. Whether it will actually damage the Greens brand overall, I think, is another matter.
Tim, a final question. Speaking of the growing anti-Semitism we have seen around the world since the October 7th attacks, we know that the British government's response to pro-Palestinian marches has been very severe. We've seen grandmothers being arrested for holding up signs. On one hand, we have Keir Starmer, who's standing up to Donald Trump now when it comes to this war in Iran. But at what point is that policy also coming to bite him?
I certainly think it's making him less popular among left liberal voters, particularly those obviously who are concerned with Gaza, and some of them will flow to the Greens and possibly the Liberal Democrats. But it is a very, very difficult situation for Starmer and the Labour government. Clearly, they don't want to be too heavy-handed because that, I think, destroys their reputation as liberals. But on the other hand, they are desperate to do something about what they regard as a growing problem with anti-Semitism.
We're going to have to leave it there. Tim Bale, thank you for joining us on the program today.